Today's date is the 25th of July. I am on my way to work. July 25th, 2019. It's 2019. Anyway, so I just wanted to kind of record a little bit some feelings that I'm having right now. We went to San Diego this last weekend for Jess's grandmother's birthday, and I had to work, so I got in late, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, while we were there, Xavier was unable to come with us, and while we were there, Xavier texted me and tells me that Mark said that Margot is going to die in the next couple of days. So I texted Mark and I was like, hey, Xavier's not here, but I would love to be able to come and pay my respects to your family and see Margot. And it's pretty funny because just weird. It was weird. So Xavier was thinking, he said that he's like, I don't even think it's real. And so I asked Mark, I'm like, please tell me that you're not lying. And he was like, I'm not lying. She's dying of cancer. And what's crazy is that his version of Xavier's life, I guess, is completely different than reality. So apparently Mark said that Margot is very angry at me because I abandoned my son to join the army. So I joined the army May 20th, 1999. That's the day that I left, and I went to basic training. Let's see, June. I think like June, June of 2000. My mom moved out to Texas, which is where I was stationed at. I was stationed at Fort Hood. My mom and Xavier moved out to Fort Hood area. We had a townhome together, the three of us. Well, in order for me to join the army, I had to have paperwork signed because I was a single parent. I wasn't married to Mark, and I had to have paperwork signed, so then that way I could join the army, because they said that I couldn't be a single parent and join the army. Well, in that process, my mom, I signed over my rights to my mom, and it was like a co-parenting thing, the three of us. So it was Mark, Linda, and myself. And it was a decision that I had to make in order for me to join the army. Now, I joined the army when I was older. I was 23 years old. I wanted to be a Marine. I couldn't be a Marine. Well, I probably could have, but the lady, the recruiter, she was like, I called and she said, well, you're too damn fat, and she hung up on me, so I could never be in the Marines. Anyway, so eventually the recruiter from the army contacted me and was like, hey, we're contacting people from Mission Bay who graduated, wondering, is the army something that you'd want to do? I was going to college at Grossmont, but I was just doing it because I felt like I had to. I had gotten accepted to college in Colorado, and I didn't go, so I felt that I felt that I needed to go. So I went to junior college, and I didn't get a degree. I was just going. I was heavy set. I was overweight. I ended up losing weight with the help of my grandparents, and I joined the army. The paperwork was signed in like April, like right before I left. And anyway, so I left May 20th, 1999, did my training, went to Fort Hood. I was stationed there in June 2000. That's when my mom actually moved out to Texas. She transferred to the Home Depot out there because she was working at Home Depot, and Xavier came with her. So yeah, anyway, so, and since then, I mean, life has happened. I met my husband, we had 3 more kids, we have 2 homes, we own cars, like, real life stuff has happened. But anyway, so in this conversation yesterday, Mark says that Margot is mad at me because I abandoned my son to join the army. So I didn't abandon my son. Abandoning would mean that you leave, that you choose not to be an active participant in someone's life. You no longer support them emotionally, physically, financially, basically become estranged. I mean, that's the definition that I know. So I didn't really abandon Xavier. And so my response to him was, well, you know, I didn't abandon my son to join the army. I had to make a choice for the future, for my future and my son's future. And I did. And I said, because his father wasn't willing to make a change. And it's pretty sad because, you know, today Xavier is 23 years old. Xavier has his own son now. Casper is 5 months old. And it's pretty sad that his biological father is acting as if I have left Xavier completely, which is interesting because any time that we went to San Diego during the last 20 years of Xavier's life, we've reached out to her, and we've made it to where she's able to see Xavier. So it's hard for me to believe that she would say something like that. Also, that, you know, we moved to Colorado in 2014, maybe 2015. Her and I had a really long discussion as moms to each other, and we talked about our concerns that we had of our children. So I was concerned about Xavier. She was concerned about Mark. We prayed about stuff and talked about oils, and so I think it's interesting. So I said to him, I was like, you know, I said, I've tried to reach out to her and be able to build a relationship with her in the most recent past. He's like, well, that should speak volumes if she's not talking to you. Well, it would, but then it's like, that's when my son was living in Washington. And at that point, it's like, then he came back and she refused to even speak with Xavier. Xavier has called, and Xavier had even been shut down. And again, this is from Xavier. But, so even Xavier has been shunned by this woman. And I really feel like the purpose of that, and to blame other people, I don't know. I just know Margot, and I know how she is, and I don't see that. And I told Mark, I said, well, I think it's awfully convenient that you're speaking of this when your mother is dying, and you're not willing to let anybody talk to her. It's unfortunate. And what's so sad is that the version of his reality is so wrong, is so skewed. He said, "You tricked me into signing the papers." There is no trick. There is no trick. I said, "I need you to sign these papers so I can join the military." And he argued with me. He's like, "Well, I don't want to sign over my custody." And I was like, "You're not signing over your custody. I'm signing over mine." And it says that in the paperwork. That's what's so interesting, is that his version is that that I tricked him into signing this paperwork to give up his parental rights. And never did I do that. He signed them on his own. So there's no trick. It was a restaurant down on, what is that? Not Marina. I can't remember the name of the street. There's an In-N-Out Burger there now, where the restaurant was. It was a family restaurant. We would go there often. I think it was Sheldon's Cafe. I don't remember. Anyway, and we went there. It was just he and I was like, "I need you to sign this paperwork." Like, that was it. There was nothing shady, nothing. Nobody was there with a gun. I literally brought the paperwork and a pen. Like, and that's it. That's all that happened. He never terminated his parental rights, because if he had, then he wouldn't have had to pay child support. Now that's a totally different situation. So several times in the last 20 years, we have, from 1999 until Xavier turned 18, I had sent him paperwork several times to have him sign adoption paperwork so then Jess could adopt Xavier. And every time he was like, "No, I'll do it." First he was like, "Yeah, I'll do it." Then it's, "No, I'm not going to do it." Then it was, "Margot told me not to," or "Gilbert told me not to, and if I do that, then I'm never going to see my son." And I was like, that's not a true statement. And we had always invited him over to our house, and I told him that. I said, "You have always had an open door to come to my house. Even my husband has invited you and would allow you to come to our house when I wasn't willing to." So it's never, and he's always known where we lived, because in our child parenting plan, we were to tell each other where we lived. And he never came. He never made an effort. So it's really interesting that he's saying that I took Xavier away from Margot, because I never did. Anytime that we were in San Diego, we went and saw her. So I just don't understand where it's coming from. And I think it's interesting because his version is what he has been telling his family his entire life. So Mark has been telling them that version Xavier's whole life. And I think that he's gotten to the point where he really thinks that is the reality. And that's unfortunate, because that there's there's nothing there to where I have not made Xavier available when he was younger. There were several times that year that I abandoned my son when I joined the Army. He was with my mother and he was with my grandparents. They lived in my grandparents' house. So he wasn't abandoned. He was taken care of. And what's so interesting is that Mark had ample opportunity to be able to see Xavier during that time. There were times where he was supposed to come and pick him up, and he never did. And Margot would end up coming and picking up Xavier. And I have that in writing. I have these court papers in writing. So I just think it's interesting that I'm being blamed for something that Mark was the one, I feel like, got into it. And his version is like, well, Helen wouldn't let me. Well, that's not true. Helen did let you. And you chose not to take the invitation. We lived in Germany. I said, hey, come over and see your son. Well, and he got upset at me because he's like, I can't come over there. And it's like, why not? Because I haven't paid my child support and they won't let me have a passport. Well, that's not me. You're not paying your child support. He still owes me money from raising his son because he hasn't paid child support. So at that point, that was 2003. And they wouldn't give him a passport. That's not my fault. As a parent, you are supposed to involve yourself in your child's life. And in a situation where where you decide not to be a part of their life, you still have to pay child support to help support that child. And when you don't, then the law takes things into their own hands. And in his case, they took away the right for him to travel outside of the United States. That's not my fault. We were in Belgium, said the same thing. Then it was just like, I have no idea where he is. We came back and we were in, where did we come to? Missouri. Yeah, 6 to 9. And then from Missouri, we were in Alaska. So, I mean, even when we were in Texas, he never came out to see Xavier. So it's really hard for me to believe that Margot said that I abandoned Xavier when I'm the one that did the best I could to be able to raise him without his biological father. And realistically, I think that the whole reason why she's angry is because, assuming that he's telling the truth, which is very hard because he does have a problem with not telling the truth. But let's pretend. So yeah, maybe she is mad. She's probably mad because I joined the Army and I left San Diego for my family. I left San Diego, therefore not being a ready thing for her to see him every day or, more than once every 3 years when we would go home. So I get that. Like that part, I'll acknowledge that. But I didn't abandon him at all. I mean, I joined the Army. I left for a year because I had to. I had to go through training. We had to wait until my mom could get there with Xavier. So I did what I needed to do. And it's not that I regret it. at all, because I cannot believe where my life is right now. It wouldn't have been there. My life wouldn't be as it is if I wouldn't have done that. I probably would have still been in San Diego trying to deal with this guy emotionally, just drained and feel like a piece of shit. Which in a way, I kind of feel like a piece of shit now, because what, you're blaming me because I got my shit together? Like, you're on a second marriage, you still lie. Our son, my son, went to go live with you. He was there for 1.5 years, 2 years, and he hates you with a passion because you lied to him. And you put him in a bad situation. So you can't turn around and say that I'm the one. It's kind of funny. Anyway, I'm almost at work. I'll talk to you later, I guess.